So the third episode of Ahsoka has finally released, Time to Fly. This one was directed by Steph, her second episode of the show's first season, and written by Dave Filoni, the showrunner who wrote all of them. So right off the bat, I think this is my second favourite episode so far after episode 1. It was a gorgeous love letter and fitting ode to Star Wars animation, and Dave's animation origins really shone through with not only the writing, but the cinematography and pacing as well. My biggest criticism is that it's way too short. While we don't know what's in store for the 4th episode next week, I suspect they should have combined episodes 3 and 4. As soon as the story gets going, we see Baylan commanding the guards on Seatos to hunt down the Jedi, and then it ends. I didn't expect such a blunt conclusion to a brilliant scene. But to be honest with you, that is what you expect for edge-of-your-seat Star Wars content. And this one had some of the most vibrant cinematic action scenes. The space battle between Shin, Marrok, Sabine and Ahsoka was not only a lovely way to take inspiration from classic Star Wars action from the OT, but a meaningful and properly timed sequence that actually led somewhere. It wasn't just pointless. It wasn't just the big booms in the sky just for the sake of it. I actually was enjoying every second of them. And even in these moments, the tension and differences between the characters, their nuances, came through. We'll talk about this in more depth later on in the video, but the dialogue specifically was hugely improved. Nothing was rushed, and on the contrary, nothing was dragged out either. You felt the gravity of every single scene. So let's get to the breakdown, because there are some really juicy things to talk about. So our episode starts with Hayang training Sabine. Our heroes are headed for Seatos, and Hayang is testing Sabine in the basic forms, which Ahsoka says Sabine remembers from when she first took her on as her apprentice. But Hayang is a harsher critic, noting that she's only getting by. And barely. The various form names take inspiration from samurai sword fighting forms, and the music reflects this. It felt straight out of chapter 13 of Mando. And there is a particular reference I want to talk about when Ahsoka recommends Hayang teach Sabine Zatoichi. Zatoichi was a fictional Japanese character created by novelist Kan Shimozawa. The character was a blind swordsman of the late Edo period, 1830s and 40s. The character was adapted in a series of films by Shintaro Katsu, who had run-ins with Akira Kurosawa, whose work of course inspired George Lucas to make Star Wars in the first place. Dave Filoni understands the importance of these themes, these motifs, these elements that brought the original magic to Star Wars when it was being conceived. The notion of using one's instincts and heightened other abilities inspired the prevalent way blindfolded training sequences have manifested throughout Star Wars history, and here, in Ahsoka too. The use of the cup, when Sabine is trying to use the Force, is another reference to that series. Ahsoka tells Sabine that her skills with the lightsaber come from her Mandalorian roots. This was a subtle nudge to wider audiences, but of course those of us who've seen Star Wars Rebels understand this was referencing a training with the Darksaber in Star Wars Rebels. She was trained by Kanan Jarrus, and it explains to fans who don't know this why she uses Ezra's lightsaber but is not a Force sensitive. Ahsoka trains Sabine and encourages her to use more than just her sight. You're training your body, but you must also open your mind, Ahsoka informs her while adding that she's got to discover her own connection to the Force. And they finally addressed a big question that's been lingering since Sabine called Ahsoka Master in the trailers. Is she Force sensitive? Well, Ahsoka says the Force resides in all living things, something we've heard from various wise masters over the years. According to Ahsoka, training, focus, and talent all constitute being successful in wielding the Force. Even though everyone has it, not everyone has what it takes. Sabine doesn't think she has, but even Kanan once said she needs to be open to it and not let her emotions get in the way. And this makes me wonder, is the reason she's so blocked off because she misses Ezra and has an underlying fear of where he is, how he's doing? Sabine is getting there slowly, and what I adore in this show so far about the dynamic between master and apprentice is that it's not instant. It's not talent or natural ability that comes suddenly to Sabine. It's being built up slowly over the episodes. There is struggle and pushback that will enable later payoffs such as Sabine successfully wielding the Force, if she does, feel more worth it. But for now, she can't. As aforementioned, until she finds Ezra, I predict she's going to be too distracted. Yang makes an interesting remark about the scarcity of Mandalorian Jedi. Of course we know of Tal Vistha, and there have been some fan theories that Sabine Wren, being from House Vistha, might be his descendant, the second Mandalorian Jedi, if Grogu doesn't already qualify. And he also mentions that Ahsoka comes from a line of unconventional Jedi. The portion of this episode dedicated to Jacen Syndulla and the New Republic is pure gravy, excellent fan service all around, done in a fashion that contributes to a wider attempt at world building and expanding our understanding of the political landscape of this time period. And we see the New Republic fleet, not to mention a series of A-Wings, which felt lifted right out of Rebels for live action. General Jacen Syndulla is seeking the help of the New Republic Committee for Resources to lead a task force to the Denab system. It is in this scene that we see Mon Mothma. Genevieve O'Reilly is back again, but later in the timeline. We saw her most recently in the Andor series, and she's interacted with Hera before in Star Wars Rebels. She's featured in Rogue One, as well as originally in the deleted scenes for Revenge of the Sith. The character herself, though, debuted with a different actress, Caroline Blakeston, in 1983's Return of the Jedi. But at this time, she is the Chancellor of the New Republic. She played a huge role in the downfall of her own government, and her own lack of decisiveness, as well as her unwillingness to tighten military policy, only facilitated the rise of the First Order a few years down the line. We get a prime example of why this is in this episode. Hera is warning about the biggest threats the New Republic faces, the return of Grand Admiral Thrawn. And it didn't seem like Mon didn't believe her, but more that she is exhausted from years of service to the rebellion and from defeating the Empire. She doesn't want to believe there's a threat, but I think deep down she knows it's a strong possibility. General Syndulla is to be taken seriously. Now, the first time I watched the episode through, I thought the only reason that Mon Mothma was bringing up Jacen and Chopper, and we'll talk about Jacen in a moment, was just fan service, just as a tease because we're about to see them. But then it dawned on me, Mon Mothma looks devastated, and she just wants to talk about family. I wonder if this is a sign that something happened to Leda, her daughter, who we saw in the Andor show. We've got to remember Mon sacrificed everything to join the rebellion and leave the Empire, so even if Leda is still alive, Mon probably mourns her daughter. The other senators on the committee, they don't think the remnants have banded together as a collective, but we know from The Mandalorian Season 3, they have, the Shadow Council. An important senator in this scene was Hamato Xiono, the father of Kazuda from Star Wars Resistance. Now, you don't need to have seen that series to understand the importance of this scene, but it's a cool familiar character from the animated side of the franchise. I was under the impression the other members of the Senate committee were not a fan of Xiono. That's why Jacen Syndulla was warned about him. Jacen Syndulla points out his lack of involvement for the rebellion pre-Endor, and he notes the only reason Hera wants a task force is to find their friend Ezra, for personal reasons, who they would rather believe died a hero. They don't believe the New Republic's funding is well spent on a personal mission. And even in Star Wars Rebels, before the Battle of Endor, the Ghost crew often struggled to get approval of the Rebel Alliance. But just as in that series, once again, our heroes are taking matters into their own hands. Now, Mon Mothma does ask about Hera's son, Jacen, who is also the son of the late Kanan Jarrus. We see him for the first time in live action alongside Chopper. Jacen asks if it's true if his aunt Sabine is going to be a Jedi, before expressing his own wishes to become one as well. This was predicted the moment we saw him in the Rebels epilogue. Are they foreshadowing that he is going to become a Jedi and maybe a darker path? Maybe he's inspired by Jacen Solo from the expanded universe, who did go down the path of darkness and became Darth Caedus. And by the way, unlike the Lego leak, he still has his green hair. I think they did it well though. As our heroes approach Seatos, they discover the Eye of Sion, while Morgan Elsbeth was building on Corellia, a massive hyperspace ring, but its last engine has not yet been fitted. To get to the second galaxy, the Eye of Sion will mimic the migration patterns of the space whales known as Purrgil through hyperspace lanes, so that is the way our heroes are going to follow suit. And Sabine mentions that the Purrgil remind her of the last time she saw Ezra, because the Purrgil are the ones who took Ezra and Thrawn into hyperspace. These were a semi-sentient species of massive whales that lived in deep space, travelling from star system to star system. In live action, they look pretty incredible. I was very impressed. I love their tentacles too. They didn't look cartoonish, they looked really fantastical. And they have a connection to both Ezra, and I also suspect Grogu, because he saw them in Mando Season 3. That was a nice way to connect both shows. Another awesome callback was Shin's headset. Something I mentioned in a previous video is exactly the same as the ones used by the Republic once upon a time, notably Anakin at the start of Revenge of the Sith in the battle over Coruscant. I thought an interesting creative decision was a live-action Ahsoka in a spacesuit, again an indication of Dave Filoni's animated roots. It worked, it was fun, I didn't have too many issues with it. And despite Morgan Elsbeth's largest attempts, our heroes survived. And I don't know if you guys caught this, but there is tension between her and Shin. I might make a separate video about this, I want to explore it in depth. We also heard Marrok talk, and there was a reference to Darth Vader, when he says, "As you wish." But our heroes are now on Seatos. We know at some stage Hera's gonna arrive as well, because we did have that one frame where she does stand over the Stonehenge type place. I also felt as though landing on Seatos had a Dagobah feel to it, the swampy forests, some of the nature sounds, the tranquility, but shit is about to go down. I can just feel it. We also expect in the next episode Baylan is gonna fight Ahsoka. I love this episode, those are my initial thoughts, but what did you guys think? Share them in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this breakdown, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. May the Force be with you, always.